Hello, my name is Jennifer Rickerby, and I'm a doctoral nursing student at George Mason University. I'm here to present to you in the Culturally Competent Care series, Module 2, which is about cultural differences in health. Here is an overview of the modules and training, and here we are at Module 2, Cultural Differences in Health. Here is the icon key. It is showing us that the head with the cogwheel is critical thinking activities. The movie screen are videos to be observed. The hammer are actions to be completed, and the eye is further information. The objectives for this module are as follows. Examine and identify the diversity of populations within cultural groups in the United States. We're also going to identify social determinants of health as a cause of disparity to cultural groups. We're going to examine the U.S. population changes from now into the future. We're going to describe the differences between equity, equality, and justice among cultural groups. We're going to interpret the class standards as a method to cultural brokerage and advocacy among cultural groups. We're going to compare cultural differences within ethnic groups. This slide is a quick snapshot of the U.S. population. We can see that there's 326,766,748 individuals within the U.S. borders. However, despite this being a very large number, it only represents 4.8% of the world's population. So we are just a snippet of the world's population. Fortunately, however, within our U.S. borders, we have nearly every nationality represented. This gives us a very rich, diverse culture within the United States. This equates to about 1 in 4 children less than the age 18 having at least one parent that is foreign-born, and the implications of that are multiculturalism. Interestingly, the United Nations only recognizes 195 states as independently ruled states or sovereign states. However, 207 states are self-proclaimed, meaning that they call themselves a state. The Olympics had a representation of 206 nations. So what this really resonates with culture is that although the United Nations only recognizes a few of these states, it's really what the state says that they are. It's the same as culture. Culture is not something that can be defined by others. It's really defined by the individual. This slide is showing us U.S. diversity in 2015. The United States Census Bureau showed us that there was 1.49 million people that immigrated into the United States in 2015. Of those people, there's 382 different languages spoken. 13.1% of the population was born outside of U.S. borders. And individual multiculturalism increased by 8.5 million people, which makes us very diverse. The Hispanic population grew by 57.5 million people. So when we look at immigration, we can see how much our immigration has drastically increased by millions of people. The year 1970, we had 9.6 million people immigrate, and now in the year 2016, we had 43.7 immigrate. And when you look specifically at the different cultures that are coming into our country, you can see that India is the lead with 175,100 people. And Philippines is down below. However, when you look at changes in immigration in 2016, Cuban immigration was up 74%, and Canadian immigration was down by 19%. So this is really just showing you shifts and changes in our population and how it's always changing, meaning that cultural competence needs to be a very broad but accurate skill when you're dealing with people of different cultures. Social determinants of health are something that can keep people from obtaining access to care. This can be lack of resources to meet basic daily needs, access to health care, access to quality education or job training. They may not have community-based resources. They may not have transportation. The public may not be safe. They may lack social supports, and they may not have technology and social media, which connects a lot of people together. They may be exposed to discrimination, racism, and distrust of the government. There might be crime, violence, and social disorder within their communities. Their social economic conditions, such as poverty, may be fluent, as well as having limited English language, which means limited health literacy. They may have unhealthy living situations. Infection rates may be high, and poor health as well. This comes from the CDC and the World Health Organization. So when we look at the World Health Organization on the definitions of what social determinants are, neighborhood and built environments, health and healthcare, social and community contacts, education, and economic stability. Of course, in this training, we're talking about school nurses and health of children in school, which fits right into education where social determinants of health exist. Equality does not always mean justice. This is a classic picture that we have seen in the class standards blueprint. It is something that has been shown over time and was actually added to. The first two images are of boys all standing on the same block trying to get a view of that great baseball game that's happening behind them. Equality means sameness, so they're all getting the same size block. But we can see that the one boy cannot see, and the boy that's already tall and already could see can see even more now. Now, if you look at the middle image, it's showing that the boy on the right, who's rather short, by giving him 2 step stools, he's allowed to actually see over the gate now and see the game, which is showing more of a fairness. However, when you remove that fence altogether and it's see-through, you now not only get transparency, but you are able to start removing barriers that are blocking people from having access to care. So equality and equity are not always the same. So let's look at poverty disparities and how that's getting in the way of patients having access to care and contributing to social determinants of health. You can see on the left that there is an image and graph of Black and Latino population and poverty rates. They were much higher than white and Asian rates in the year 2016. You can see that Black was at 22.4%, Latino at 21.9%, with the white population being at 9.6%. So the incidence of chronic disease and costs is also something that's quite disparate. So when we look at the graph on the left, you can look at diabetes. You can see that it's lower in whites and much higher in Blacks and Latinos. And you can also see that Asians have a really high rate of stroke as well as Black comparatively to other cultures. So this makes that disproportion of illness by race. Obesity also is very high in the Hispanic population at 47%. So the cost of disparities in inequitable care is a $1.24 trillion business, and this was in the year 2009. Cultural brokerage, as we talked before, is the bridging or linking or mediating between groups or persons of different cultures and bringing people together. Nurses are cultural brokers. We do this daily. When they become culturally competent, this creates our ability to bring people together even more. Cultural competence also gives us the ability to advocate for disparities so that disparities can be reduced. Think Cultural Health was launched in the year 2004 by the United States Department of Health and Human Services in the United States government. The objective was to reduce disparities among people, and it's sponsored by the Office of Minority Health. The focus is to increase cultural and linguistic opportunities in health services and make sure that they are appropriate, make sure that the people working for these services are also culturally diverse, and really try to bridge gaps. So, critical thinking question, what are the class standards? So this is an image that was put together regarding the national class standards, and those standards were developed to create more equity and equality to diverse populations. They were also developed to improve the quality of services provided to all individuals and respect the whole individual and respond to the individual's health needs. The class standards also were developed to assist health professionals to bring about positive health outcomes for diverse populations and sort of bridge those gaps and reduce those disparities. We're also set up to maintain dignity and equality of care, which are rights for all individuals, not just privileges for the few. So you can see here when the patient starts at home plate, there's an opportunity for us to offer high quality care. And we can do this if we do so with respect and responsiveness, cultural responsiveness. If we're transparent and we offer dignity, this gives us the ability to be focused on outcomes that are patient-centered and create more equity and equality for patients. Here is a case study. The unfortunate accident while visiting a distant country. You are rushed to a nearby hospital for treatment. You do not speak or read the language, and there is no one there that speaks English. There are people tending to you that may or may not be doctors or nurses, but they are not wearing clothing or identification that signifies what their role is. How would the class standards assist you if they were available in this country? So some of the ways that they may assist you are that you would be granted an interpreter that's a medical interpreter that would inform you of everything that was happening to you, why everything was happening, and what was actually wrong with you. So without the class standards, patients essentially don't know what medical services they're receiving, why they're receiving them, and whether they're appropriate or not to that particular patient. Okay, so one of the primary headings for the class standards are the governance and leadership and workforce heading. These headings help to advance a sustained leadership that promotes the class standards equity. So this is in organizations or groups. They essentially have to equal what the population is. So if we have very diverse populations, then we need diverse leaders in those roles, including gender as well as cultural differences. We need to recruit and support diversity in leadership and provide ongoing education and training regarding class standards. Everybody needs updates. Communication and language assistance, just like I was discussing with this case study. You need to offer language assistance to those with limited language proficiency. The best way for people to be successful is when they understand what it is their instructions are or why something has happened. If they are scared or uninformed, this is when we can have poor outcomes. We need to inform all patients that language assistance is available verbally and writing. Just getting by without an interpreter is not only unfair to the patient, but goes against the class standards. Inform all providers that the use of untrained translators should be avoided. And provide easy to understand and multimedia materials and signage in service areas, whenever possible. Engagement, continuous improvement, and accountability are other parts of the class standards. These are to establish goals, policies, and practices that are congruent with the class standards. We need to make sure that all policies are consistent with what the class standards say. Since we do have this very diverse population, we need to make sure we are meeting everyone's needs. Therefore, we need ongoing quality assessments of the class standards related to any measures put into place. We need collection and maintenance and measurement of class standards. So it's one thing to put them into place, but we need to report what our outcomes are and look at what how the class standards are being utilized to make sure that they're being utilized correctly. We need to assess community health assets, determine that the class standards are maintained and continued, and create conflict and grievance report services that uphold the class standards. So this is meaning that if somebody has a grievance or has a conflict, according to the class standards, they need to be able to make that complaint or grievance. And the hope is not really to look at it negatively, but perhaps to improve on what we're already doing to make things better. So this is a feedback process of the class standards, and it's for all stakeholders and the public to be able to feedback to make improvements continuously to what care is being provided. So here are some examples of cultural differences in health. So we have health beliefs. In some cultures, people believe that talking about a possible poor outcome will potentially make that happen. So they may not want to talk about something for fear that it may actually make it happen. Health customs. In some cultures, family members play a large role in healthcare decision-making, even if they're not present, which may be very surprising that a mother or a father making a decision for a child may have to conference in with elders or other decision-makers prior to making that decision, which is really just part of their culture. Ethnic customs, differing roles of men and women, which is something that many of you are aware of, but it may be up to either a male or a female to make that decision, and following those cultural differences and expectations are very important for that particular individual. So making time for those decisions to be made appropriately will reduce stress. Religious beliefs. Religious faith and spiritual beliefs may affect healthcare seeking behaviors and people's willingness to accept specific treatments or behavioral changes. You may be aware of, for instance, the example would be Jehovah's Witness and their belief that the blood is part of their spirit and part of their soul, and if they receive a blood transfusion, they have a mix of souls, or some variation of that belief. Is probably the most famous answer to that religious belief question. Dietary customs. So if you're suggesting that they have pork as a form of intake and they're Muslim, that's probably not going to go very well with their cultural customs, and this patient will then be unable to follow through with the healthcare plan. Interpersonal customs. So, for instance, eye contact and physical touch will be expected in some cultures and inappropriate or offensive in others. So we need to bridge the cultural divide and bring cultures together. So in summary, the U.S. population is very diverse with many languages spoken. Working with these populations requires cultural sensitivity. Cultural brokerage can increase cultural awareness, but requires culturally competent individuals to put it into place. So nurses are the middlemen in creating cultural understanding. Now that the discussion is being had and people can choose to become culturally competent, this competence must be present in all elements of healthcare delivery. This will lead to reduction of social determinants and increased access to healthcare. This bridges the cultural divide. These are my references. And so our take-home point regarding the class standards. Care should be patient-centered, respectful, responsive. This all has to do with their individual needs and preferences, and also their values. This is class standard number 1. We need to keep in mind the importance of the person's culture and beliefs at the center of care, and this is paramount, especially when making clinical decisions.